this okay? Everyone hear me? My name is Colin Agi, and I spent about 10, 12 years of my life living in Northern California in the Bay Area. I've since decamped to New York City, a decision that I regularly question, especially when I wake up here and look at the Bay. But we have assembled some really interesting people today just to kind of talk about what they find inspiring in San Francisco, both on a cultural level, a business level, technology level. And I think we'll start by just having everyone kind of briefly introduce themselves and go through some questions and themes.
I'm Liz Dunn. I work at Funny or Die, which is a comedy video website, and also a platform that runs a number of other video websites, each sort of with their own area of expertise. And I have been working in technology in the Bay Area since 1994.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jeremy Townsen. I started an underground dining project called the Ghetto Gourmet in my basement in Oakland, and have since done about 350 sort of community dining events in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Miami, and I do other stuff too sometimes.
Hey, my name is Amit Gupta. I run a company that's publishes the world's greatest photography newsletter. It's called Jojo. And I also started a casual co-working event called Jelly, where people show up every 2 weeks in a stranger's home with their laptops and work there for the day. And it's kind of spread from New York to about 20 other cities.
I'm Kevin Allison. I write for the Financial Times. I came here 3 years ago from New York and was working before that for the FT in London. I mainly cover the business of Silicon Valley, but I also branch out to write about different cultural things that happen in San Francisco from time to time.
Okay, to just start with a bit of a kind of broad overarching question, I wanted to get some thoughts as to what how San Francisco compares to other global hubs. And Kevin, I thought I'd start with you. So sure. Tons of microphones.
I think the thing that most inspires me about San Francisco is the way that it is able to hold its own as a global city against cities like New York or London, in spite of the fact that if you look at San Francisco itself, and even if you include the sort of Palo Alto area where a lot of the .com and tech innovation happens, it's so much smaller than a New York City or a London. Yet somehow it manages to punch above its weight in very interesting ways. It's very interesting to think about what that smallness allows San Francisco to do. And the thing that I've noticed is that living in San Francisco, you're very removed from the traditional power structures. Living in London or New York, they're sort of the center of the universe of finance and business and the places where so many of these big business decisions get made. San Francisco, on the other hand, within the universe of cities where we have correspondents at the FT, San Francisco is the far western edge. So we're the very last stop. We're the last ones to get up in the morning and the last ones to go to bed at night. So I think that space and having that cushion of not being that center of the traditional power leaves San Francisco in a great place to be able to be innovative and be almost a playground or a laboratory for people doing very interesting things.
Anyone else have any thoughts on the broad question?
Go for it.
Yeah, I agree that I noticed that in New York, they're always trying to get agile, or they'll hear about like the way that we do rapid iteration or development and how do we get there. And I think that because we didn't have traditional power structures, there's nothing really to lose. So we could sort of freestyle it without all that risk. And I think what happens when you have a lot of money at stake or a lot of power at stake, change is very scary. So the good thing about being small, and I feel like the Bay Area is very small time, like we don't have any celebrities, people know what Sergey Brin looks like, well, and Larry Ellison. But you know what, or Steve Jobs, obviously. But I just feel like because there's less to lose and there's less of a spotlight on you, you can just freestyle it. And I feel like that's why we get so much done.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the things that we talked about in getting ready for the panel was the the idea that when you approach a New York City or when you approach London or Hong Kong, that you never have a moment of feeling like, I get it. Like, I can totally get my head around this place. And I think that San Francisco has this element of, I can walk across the city. You know, I can get out at Embarcadero and I can spend a day and walk to Ocean Beach and see a lot of this city. And I think that one of the things that contributes to San Francisco's sort of openness and its environment of being a good incubator for new ideas and innovation is that it's on more of a human scale. It's on more of a sort of pedestrian kind of scale.
Just going back to something Liz said, how cool is it that our celebrities are Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison? Like, we don't have like beautiful people who do beautiful things and act on screen. We have like big-time nerds who made. We have big-time nerds who just like made something amazing and brought it into the world, and that's the idol that we worship. And I think that says a lot about who we are.
And I think a lot of this kind of creativity and innovation comes from one of the trends that I've really noticed in this city is that a lot of people have their main gig, you know, that pays the bills, but there's seems to be there's a prevalence of really interesting side projects. I know, Kevin, you had an example of that with some tech entrepreneurs.
A few months ago, I was having lunch with a friend of mine who works for Google, or worked for them until recently. He's now starting his own company. And he just said something that struck me as the ultimate San Francisco thing to say, where he said, you know, I was having a lunch with a bunch of it was a dim sum brunch with a bunch of current and former Google people, and everyone at the table was working on a Facebook application. And it just kind of, I don't think there's any other city in the world where that might happen. You know, everyone who's got their thing going on the side, their little project that they're working on, and part of it is just that the tools of the web, the internet has evolved in a way that allows that kind of experimentation to happen with very little investment up front. You can just be playing around with something in your free time and turn it into Facebook or turn it into some other big property. It's very interesting.
And speaking of kind of that organic development, I think we have two particularly great examples on the stage here, you know, with Ghetto Gourmet and Jelly. So I'd like you guys just to briefly kind of talk us through what you've been doing and some of your observations as they pertain to kind of the culture of the city.
Hello? Hello? I don't know if that works. I'll take this one.
Microphone disaster.
Yo. Well, I think that San Francisco hits on a number of themes all at once. One of the things that we talked about was the landscape and the climate. You know, when I came here, I was really struck with sort of the physical nature of the place. And that physical nature and the history of the city has informed and bred a culture that is interested in food, and not only how the food tastes, but where it comes from. And it was that kind of environment that provided a really great proving ground for me to try some new things in terms of dining and community and socializing and networking. And they're ideas that I don't know would have taken ground in another city without having kind of a historical imperative of, you know, food is important, dining is important, being with people is important. The nature, I mean, one of the things that's similar between Amit and my projects are that people are looking for that community. We tend to be a little bit more ahead of the curve out here in terms of technology, so we're spending lots of time on the internet, we're spending lots of time in the box and online, and both of our projects, I think, are indicative of our desire to sort of use the internet to connect in real time, to connect in real space, and whether it's dining and entertainment or it's co-working and collaboration, I think that the city kind of opens the door. There's a willingness to trust people. There's a willingness to sort of get out of one's comfort zone, and there's an encouragement to see what you can get out of that, you know, kind of thinking out of your own box.
It's kind of interesting. Jelly started just kind of relatively recently in San Francisco. It was one of the last cities to get it in the sequence, and it started in New York. And I think one of the things that I find interesting about that is that San Francisco almost doesn't need it because, I mean, there's so many people here doing so many interesting things, and being creative and doing side projects and just being creative on your own time is just what people do here for fun. And jelly was something that kind of exported part of that culture to all these other cities, whether it was Chicago or Boston or Sydney or wherever, where there were pockets of people that wanted to be creative and wanted to find other people like them who wanted to just work on stuff, hack on stuff, build things, and they didn't have a way to find those people, so Jelly provided it. And there is, a strong Jelly here in San Francisco now, but I think it's interesting to note that need, like Jeremy mentioned, is pretty universal, and bringing people together through the internet, whether it's because of food or around technology, I think is just a strong, powerful concept that's that we're going to see a lot more of in all sorts of spaces, and these just happen to be two that happen to have taken root here as well.
And another thing I wanted to touch on is just kind of the difference in business culture in San Francisco. I think outside of the major financial hubs, as we mentioned, London, New York, Hong Kong, I think that there's a different culture when it comes to business. It's not as I understand it, it's not a super sort of NDA, super legal culture. And I wanted to talk to ask Liz for her perspective on this, because she's been in San Francisco for a long time, and I think has a good vantage point on it. So.
Yeah, I mean, for example, the first company I worked at, which was a tech company, which was General Magic, was a spin-off of Apple. And so obviously that's a formal arrangement. There were NDAs and all that stuff. But a lot of those guys went off to found WebTV, and then one of those guys founded Danger, who does the Sidekick, and now he's doing the Android mobile platform. And I think that it's just assumed that, I mean, I'm sure that there's NDAs that he has to sign. But in general, the idea is we're making all this stuff, we're running as fast as we can. I don't have a printer, I don't have an NDA language, I don't know a lawyer. Like, I'm just going to run as fast as I can and make all these cool things. And I definitely feel like the culture, and this is why Steve Jobs is one of our celebrities, is make something really awesome. Don't, dick around with lawsuits. Don't, well, I need credit on that paper. Why isn't my name above yours? We just want to be awesome, I think.
So more of a meritocracy.
More of a meritocracy. Yeah. And I do think that the smartest person will win. So it doesn't matter if I tell you my idea and I don't have you sign an NDA. It's if I make it better than you, I'll be successful. So I feel like ideas are very freely shared, and whoever is the best implementer, like Steve Jobs can come up with we've had cell phones for a decade, but he can come up with a new one. It's not a new idea to have a mobile phone. So that's what I think.
And Kevin, from the business journalism perspective, I mean, you're regularly in front of some of the most interesting CEOs and movers and shakers here in the Bay Area. Do you have any perspective on kind of the difference as opposed to London and New York with the business leadership?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Liz was saying. There's very much an attitude in San Francisco and in the Valley of we don't know where we're going, but we're on our way. Mm-hmm. And from big companies all the way down to small little startups, there's an atmosphere of collaboration and experimentation which allows people to take that attitude. The best example of this to me today is Twitter. Evan Williams started the thing not really knowing why people might want to communicate in 140 character messages or what they might do with it. But here it's emerged as a new medium of communication that everyone's using and causing to crash, of course. But
the fail whale.
And the thing about Twitter, Facebook to me is the same way. These things that people were just doing, not quite knowing exactly where it would lead. And it's very interesting. Facebook and Twitter both still don't really have business models. They have ideas of where they want to go, but the emphasis here on the West Coast is on just creating the great technology or creating the great product that draws the interest. Figure out the business model later. And I think it's very inspiring that the attitude out here from businesses that's a thing that should be encouraged and that should be allowed to flourish, whereas in other places I don't think that's necessarily the case.
And, go ahead.
Well, I think that grows out of sort of an individual ethic. When I first moved here, I was really struck with all the people that I met that said, oh, I'm a yoga instructor, or I'm a potter, or I'm a painter. And it was like, yeah, but you have a car, and you have a house, and you dress really nice, and you have a phone. And they say, well, yeah, I work at SBC as well, but I'm really a yoga teacher. I work at Google, but really what I want to do is make pots. And I think that there's this encouragement. I think one of the reasons why the ideas are so rich is because we're sort of encouraged and supported to really follow an individual kind of path. That question of, well, do trends matter? Well, they do to some point, but not if they get in the way of kind of where you're naturally inclined to go. And I think that grows into some of these businesses where it's, hopefully one day my yoga teaching is going to take over my life and I'm not going to work at Google. And hopefully my working at Google isn't going to take over my life and I'm going to be able to do my own thing. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it's kind of this direction, and it's definitely not all of these directions. And so there's that sort of general individual eccentricity, I guess.
Or you could be the original massage therapist that worked at Google and was compensated in options and is now
well, yeah, there's
multi-millionaire.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Going back to Kevin's point, just about this, let's build something cool and kind of see where the business model takes us. Obviously, that's almost it works well a lot of times, but in other times, one of the things that I did want to talk about is part of the collective consciousness in the business and media and tech communities here is those who have lived through kind of the ridiculous valuations and the dot-com boom. But I think in my opinion, there's quite a bit of resilience from the tech and entrepreneurial communities here. But I just wanted to kind of ask the question about what do you think the boom did for this city?
Well, and I don't know the financials of Twitter, but I bet you that they didn't get $40 million before they started building it. You don't need, I feel like what happened when there was so much VC money around, you would be like, oh yeah, I want to have an online store and I need $30 million. And people would give that person $30 million. And those things don't, it should be like anything that you build in your garage where you start as lean and mean as you possibly can. So, I mean, the dot-com boom days were awesome. I loved them. Got my BMW. I went to Vegas a lot. It was good. And when we all lost our money, it was fine. Most of us just stayed around anyway and kept working. And I think that it was because we were, you have all these Google millionaires and they don't bail just because they're millionaires anymore. They still want to make cool stuff. And I think that what happened in the boom also is you had a lot of people coming to the Bay Area because they heard about all the money and they didn't necessarily have a use case. Like, I'm Evan Williams and I want to, make this funny thing where we give each other this microblogging experience. They think, I'm going to make a lot of money. And that's, of course, the wrong place to start a business plan. Like, dude, I'm going to score. So, and I think a lot of those businesses were like that. They weren't about the user. They weren't about filling a need. They were more like, I hear that you can go to, Silicon Valley, get all this money, and then you get a Lamborghini, and it's awesome.
Well, I think it's like any kind of culling. It's like a forest fire. After the fire, the strongest and the most resilient and the most adaptive and the most resourceful sort of organisms kind of make their way through the destruction. And I think that's also evident in San Francisco. We talked about sort of the earthquake. We've had a couple of earthquakes, and there's this spirit of, okay, pick it back up, and here we go. We're going to build it back up again. And so I think it's...
And I also think it's totally fine to fail here because, because there's not, everyone had probably a failure the businesses that did well in the dot-com bust were like very traditional kind of financial services or other kinds of more like service-based businesses or technology platforms like, video streaming. But everyone's worked at some failures by now, and it really doesn't matter. And in fact, it's a totally normal conversation to have when you're doing something and you go, you know what, we did that at Excite. Here's what we did. We kept just looking at Yahoo and we would copy all their, product releases, and that's why we never caught up. But look at what Google did. Google was a search engine, the very last to arrive, and yet still they innovated because they got rid of all the growth parts, the parts where you try to get a user to go somewhere else. So we're always kind of pointing to the failures and learning from them because it's not that shameful.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I think between the first boom and this boom is that, yeah, during the first boom you could raise $40 million for your online store, and you could spend it really fast, but you could also spend it really slowly, and that would mean that you were spending a lot of time failing. And I think that one of the best things about this boom is that people are investing less money. They're interested in, they can actually see that it doesn't require $40 million to start a company. You can do it on $500,000 or $200,000 or in some cases $15,000. And that means you can fail really fast, which is really, really good. And you see that happening a lot. And I think that kind of churn is what the Valley didn't have as much the first time around. And this time, it's not as loud. Like, you don't have a fucked company out there documenting every single failure every week. But there's lots of companies, you know, folding. You don't hear about it. And that's wonderful, because it means people are trying small ideas, trying them quickly, and deciding that they don't work and moving on to the next one.
I actually have, I wrote a story a few months ago about this trend among people who are now leaving Google and some of these other companies that went public, and their options invested, and now they're starting their own companies. They've dreamed about this for a long time. They're getting into something called micro-entrepreneurship. I have a friend whose company is called Mixer Labs. They don't have one specific product. They're working on 3 or 4 or 5 different ideas simultaneously, with the hopes that if one of them starts to take off, if they got enough bright people, they can start to put resources disproportionately behind the idea that starts to take off. So really the cost of experimentation, just like you said, has come down so much that people are able to really, it's almost this shotgun model of entrepreneurship where they're able to work on a bunch of crazy different ideas and really cast the ones that don't work aside very quickly and put more resources behind the ones that are succeeding.
It's almost like a modified VC model where, you know, VCs try to have a pool of 10 companies, and
Right.
if one hits it, then they're great. But this seems like the next generation of that, where it's allocation of resources to, you know.
Yeah,
see
it's not a group of guys going to VCs and asking for money for one idea. It's a group of 3 or 4 people who are very bright and are capable of working on multiple ideas at the same time. And the other point is that, as opposed to the last boom, I think a lot of the innovation that's been happening over the past 4 or 5 years, it's been built on a much firmer footing. So we went through that first wave, and a lot of companies went under, but there were a lot of survivors that ended up building this infrastructure upon which a lot of this most recent boom has been built. In the first boom, if you were trying to sell advertising on your site, media buyers had no idea how to buy it. There were no standardized forms for buying advertising. There wasn't a standardized image size for a banner ad. But today these things exist.
And also the actual metrics for calculating some of these things. You know, they hadn't been fully baked yet.
And now they're at least, nowadays I think they're at least half-baked, I think it's fair to say. And so people are able to build something with a lot fewer resources just because there is this infrastructure, because you can use something like Google AdWords to spread your idea, or Facebook to spread your idea.
Well, it's something that you touched on in terms of, Liz, in terms of not having to start from scratch. You know, we've all got really good ideas, and when you get 4 or 5 people that are willing to collaborate and say, you know, I've got these ideas and you've got these ideas, there's an element of collaboration, but we're also not having to, you know, code it from the beginning. You know, we can kind of stand on the shoulders of the people and the work and the code and the things that have come before us, and I think that's significant in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the kind of business that you guys are in. Like, I'm kind of in we want to make money. We're big business, and, you know, you work at Financial Times, and you guys are kind of more about quality of life.
That's just my side project.
You work for Microsoft.
Well, Photo Jojo is a for-profit business.
So, I mean, it feels like quality of life is more important this time around, also.
Oh, I mean, that's something that we spoke about in terms of when you live in Manhattan, the Hudson River Valley is an hour and a half away. You can totally get there. But who is leaving the Lower East Side? Nobody, you know? But I think when you live in San Francisco, there is this expectation that you're paying a lot of rent, you're in, you know, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and we don't just have surfing, we have some of the gnarliest, baddest waves on the planet an hour and a half away. And we have some of the best snowboarding and snow sports. And I think that there's this maybe since the bust, and just I think living that sort of West Coast lifestyle, you have to take advantage of these things. We can't work ourselves to death. We need to go and take advantage of the natural landscape and some of the cultural things that are happening in the city.
Yeah. I mean, actually now what I hear a lot is people are saying, if you are spending 14 hours a day at your job, you're probably not very good at it. You know, like a coder shouldn't be in his chair at 2 a.m. every night if he's writing really efficient code that's scalable. And I think that that is one of those things that we learned from last time. I mean, we all burned ourselves out really hard the first time. And what did we get for it?
Vegas.
Total Vegas. Double down.
And we've talked a lot about, you know, what makes San Francisco special. Where would you like this city to go? What do you feel is lacking? What is promised that you see that maybe starting to bubble up that hasn't existed here before? And I realize that this might be kind of a tough question, but you want to jump up on this one?
Well, I think that there are a number of trends that are going to be really, really important to how we continue to innovate and continue to communicate with markets and with people. Things like Creative Commons, things like open source technology. I think the ability for us to, the idea of Twitter as a utility, when we're talking about, well, there's the water and there's electricity and there's Twitter, like, but at the same time, the idea is, well, I'm carrying on, fairly constant communication with people from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different places on Earth, and we're all working at different levels on different projects. And I think that level of communication and that level of collaboration is something that I think will continue, and I think it'll continue to be based out of San Francisco. I had a conversation with my friend when we talked about Greenwich Village and the Haight-Ashbury as physical centers for culture. Don't exist anymore, because you can live in Cleveland or you can live in Fort Wayne and you can communicate and collaborate on an open level. But I think that San Francisco is unique in that you can go down to Soma and you can visit a dozen different really, really neat startups. Even though the sort of intersection of culture has moved to the internet, there is still in San Francisco a physical place.
And perhaps this idea of kind of the the 60s kind of karma culture and everything like that, which I realize is somewhat of a San Francisco cliche, but I do think it's something that will live on beyond that the generation that actually experienced it, which I think is interesting.
I mean, would you have a company start in New York City that says, our mission statement is do less evil or don't be evil, something to that effect? That it's hard to be in San Francisco and not sort of nod to the history of we're making the world a better place. We're trying not to be as bad as maybe other people have been. And that there's people before us who, although they might be in lots of different areas, they are informing how we do things. And so I think it's an ethic, it's a sort of moral that we have to all, I think it's in the back of our minds as we're building businesses and building ideas and trying to get them out there.
And speaking to that, allocating all of the intellectual capital and the ideas with technology here, Kevin, do you want to talk at all about clever ways that you've seen either companies or individuals kind of leverage emerging technology in charitable ways, or do you have any examples off the bat?
I've got a good friend of mine she thinks up and runs nonprofits. And both of her nonprofits have been focused on the tech industry, of harnessing some of the ideas and the talent of people in the tech industry to do good, not just for their companies, but for the world or for their community. So one of them was a nonprofit called Building Blocks, which was trying to establish a Peace Corps for corporate America, starting right here in the Valley, sending people from companies like Hewlett-Packard or from engineering companies to Africa or to parts of Asia to do engineering projects or to contribute their expertise in 4 or 6 week time blocks. She's now moved on to start another nonprofit called Encore, which is taking engineers and scientists who are retiring from some of these tech companies, getting them to teach math and science in local schools that are disadvantaged. And it's just really interesting that there is this atmosphere of let's give back to the community.
And it also seems like seeing that the open source application of kind of creative people being given a problem. Ed Cotton, who just did the opening presentation, has played a role in something called Planning for Good, which is leveraging some of the smartest planners, I guess in the United States and the world to kind of tackle problems. So I mean, it's another example of that, and it's not necessarily a geographic thing, but I do think that the technology and kind of the spirit is a very San Francisco, of San Francisco origins. Amit,
Yeah, I was just thinking about the last question you asked about where you'd want San Francisco to go or where you want it to grow to in the future. And I can't think of anything. I don't want San Francisco to change at all. Like, I think our chief export is startups, right, or ideas. And every city kind of has its unique culture of export. In LA, I think it's about movies, and it's about television, it's about media. In New York, I lived in New York for 4 years. I think it's like about moving money around. I don't think they actually have, like, maybe it's hipness, maybe they export hipness. It could be vodka. I'm not sure what they export, but we export startups, and I think that's what we should keep doing. That's what we're good at. And it's great to see entrepreneurs, make their money and then go out and do something good in the world, but I still see that as a sideline, and I kind of think it should stay a sideline. I don't know.
Although I'm never really in the habit of defending New York, because
I love New York.
I do think one of the interesting things that I've experienced is there almost is kind of a small little pocket of this San Francisco ethic when it comes to the people that are really doing, innovative things in terms of collaboration, startups. My friend Noah Breyer and peers, with LikeMind, that's just kind of it's that ethic, And so there is kind of a small pocket in New York of that, but then there is a bunch of sort of big, monster capitalists and
There's definitely a ton of great startups like Tumblr and a bunch of startups that are coming out of New York that are beautiful and doing really good stuff. I don't want to belittle New York, but I mean, we have a financial center too here in San Francisco. I don't really know where it is, but I think it exists.
I do have to say, San Francisco's openness to different kinds of people works in both directions. So it's not all just touchy-feely, let's all get along, let's all collaborate and share in all the goodness kind of people that San Francisco attracts. One of the most interesting people in the city of the past 10 years, I think, is Peter Thiel, the guy who started PayPal with Max Levchin and sold it to eBay, and then went on to found one of the world's most successful macro hedge funds, and then ended up investing the first $500,000 in Facebook. And he is not a touchy-feely kind of guy. He is very much of the libertarian, ruthless, genius type bent.
Me too.
And guys like Mark Zuckerberg, in many ways, I think is the same. Steve Jobs, I think you could argue, is that way. That kind of ruthless genius. It attracts and allows them to flourish, as well as people who are way into the collaboration.
Well, I also feel like if you're from here, so I grew up in Santa Cruz, and that just gave me a 20-year head start on hating hippies. Like, it doesn't, I think that if you have that kind of culture available to you easily, you don't have to. You can ignore it. You can take the good things from it and just keep going.
Well, I just wanted, along the same lines of building blocks and Encore, I just wanted to mention Taproot is based out of San Francisco. It's a really wonderful organization that's taking marketing, HR, and IT people from the private sector and organizing little micro teams that help nonprofits with their marketing, HR, and IT. And it's amazing it's almost like an open source thing in that they've put together these project management packages so that you get 5 people, they're all working remotely, they all have really clear duties, and they build a new website or build a new logo or build a new key message for these nonprofits that could really use it. And in the same vein, something like Kiva doing microfinancing, I think that these ideas could start other places, but the guy who started Taproot started it here, and he figured it out, and now it's going to LA for the first time. It's been in New York, it's been in DC,
So before we open up, I'd like to maybe have a few questions, but I wanted everyone to just kind of say one thing in San Francisco, whether it's a macro trend or whether it's a particularly interesting company, or just one thing that they would pull out that they find really inspiring right now. So we'll start with Kevin.
By far, the coolest thing I think about San Francisco is beta breakers. It's for anyone who's not familiar with it, it is a happening, which is I think the best way to describe it. That at one point was a serious road race from the Bay side of San Francisco, 7 miles across to the ocean. And it just has evolved over time into this bizarre carnival of awesomeness that it is very hard to describe, but people getting up in costumes and rolling pirate ships with kegs of beer and people dressed as salmon running the wrong way against the crowd. It captures to me just everything about the kind of zaniness and experimental and quirky nature of the city, and the ethos of San Francisco I think is very much beta breakers.
I think I'd say co-working, and it's not because of Jelly, but because there's a lot of people working on it here in the city, and I think a lot of the ideas are spreading from here in San Francisco and in the Bay, and it's something that it seems like a large part of the world really does need, because as more and more of us are starting to work from home or be able to be or are able to be mobile, it seems to be feeling a really interesting need for building community again, and yeah, I love seeing it flourish here.
I think in the same vein as co-working, I think just the general theme of building alternatives to sort of the status quo, and I'd say critical mass. I think if you need to exercise your inner angst and rebellion, and you need to go act like a delinquent for an afternoon, there's no better way than getting on a bicycle and standing in, sitting in the middle of rush hour traffic on Van Ness. And just saying, hey man, ride a bike. But I think that kind of edginess and audacity and boldness and saying, look, there is an alternative, and we're going to demonstrate it really well. And I think the co-working thing is along this. And so is the Ghetto Gourmet in terms of providing an alternative to the way we've done it before.
This is a weird answer, but it's what popped into my head. I'm going to say Delfina Restaurant. It is one of the best restaurants in the world, and they started it when it only had about 6 or 7 tables. I've seen Julia Child there. It's a great example of doing something so well. Like it's a terrible neighborhood, can't park, and it's kind of the broke neighborhood too. And they just did something so world class that the whole world comes to sit at its feet.
Cool. Do we have any time for any questions? Or about 5 minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to ask anything of our distinguished panel here, fire away.
All right. Hi. I say this respectfully as I guess, going on a 10-year San Francisco resident. But definitely as I travel the country, I know we have a reputation for being a little bit smug. And you sense the optimism and like the, yay, we're so great attitude. But I wonder if anyone on the panel could address that at all, maybe either vis-a-vis other cities or specifically with respect to the Bay Area.
Particularly to San Francisco, I have a friend, Kamal Bell, who's a comedian. He does a one-person show. It's Ending Racism in About an Hour. And one of the things that he points out in the show is that San Francisco, the most liberal city in the world, has a African-American population at 6%. And I think that for all of our talk about being diverse and being welcoming, that maybe I see that as kind of a big warning sign in terms of what are we doing in terms of planning, what are we doing in terms of really welcoming people and creating a good environment. But I mean that's just sort of in terms of thinking it's the most liberal city in the world and there's a real gap there.
But also maybe it comes from like LA gets all the beautiful people. New York gets all the rich people. We're the nerds that are sitting around going, well, I didn't want to hang out with them anyway, because you know what? I have it going on. Don't I? Right? We have it going on, right? I mean, I think some of it is that. Like, we have this, there is a chip on our shoulder a little bit.
I mean, it's a beautiful place, and I think that even though we all kind of pay to be here, I think that we feel like, you know, it's one of the best places on the planet, and it's a bummer that you don't ever leave Manhattan, and it's a bummer that you don't ever get out of traffic, you know, in LA. I mean, traffic's bad here too, but I don't know. I mean, I think that there is. A friend of mine once said that LA was full of very common people that were trying to seem sort of presumptuous, but San Francisco is full of presumptuous people that were trying to seem very common. And I think that's true, you know, but it's also, we have good reason. The food's great, you know, there's lots of weird stuff going on, and it's a beautiful place to be.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one.
Hi, I have a question about kind of partly the housing prices and also the sense of an exodus. I feel like a lot of my friends, especially ones who aren't in technology and don't have some kind of potential payoff, feel like they're not going to settle down ever long term in the Bay Area, and so they're here for a few years and then they move to Portland or to Seattle. And there's a feeling of like the really gritty, really creative stuff is starting to move to these smaller cities that can support that. So I'd like to hear your comments.
I mean, I think that's the story of Brooklyn. I think it's a problem. You know, I think that it's totally unrealistic for, you know, for me to think about buying a house in San Francisco. You know, it's just not something that's on the horizon. And I think that's a bummer for San Francisco. You know, because I'm a cool guy. You know, so and it should be doing something to like keep that talent here, but. You can go to Nashville, Tennessee, or you can go to Chicago, and you can get a floor in a warehouse for $700 a month. And, you know, wow, like, I can just get online, and I'll be in San Francisco. You know, I'll be able to collaborate. But I think it's a problem. I think it's something that we really have to address.
And I think that trend does happen quite often. I mean, whether it's people moving to Berlin or moving to Nashville, I mean, I think that urban housing sort of prices and that you know escalation is going to be a problem. I think the reason why people still keep kind of migrating to cities like San Francisco is a lot of the reasons that we've discussed. You know, it's like the innovation, the culture, and the collaboration, and just the fact that you could probably bump into someone on the street and, you know, he might have founded and sold 2 companies and is on his 3rd. You know, and that concentration of interesting people is probably, you know, one of the reasons why people are still here. So I just want to thank our panel. I think everyone had amazing things to say, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming by today. And Pierce, back to you.